Hi, everyone. This is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. Sher, you and I have, like I always say, having the discussion before the discussion. And today we wanted to bring a topic that has not only helped us, but we've just noticed how much it's helping our clients. And that is recognizing within our own bodies when we are getting dysregulated, stressed, going towards hyperarousal, which is more amped up and panic, or hypoarousal, which is going to get more shut down. The reason why we want to bring this is because when we learn about integration of our thinking center, our feeling center, and our will, which would be our doing center, our body, integration is when all of those are in alignment and we are in our sweet spot of window of tolerance. We're alive. We feel, we think, we're doing what we want to do. We love being in that place. And you said something before we pressed record. You said, Kandace, the more I'm living in my window of tolerance, the more I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when we've lived a lot of our lives being dysregulated, that felt normal. And we knew how to really cope. When we are in dysregulation, we learn coping skills there. How do I cope when I'm ramped up? How do I cope when I'm shutting down? And those coping strategies feel safe, but we're actually in dysregulation. And I wonder if it would be worthwhile to just give a really quick little synopsis again of the window of tolerance. And just to let our listeners know, we've talked about this in the past, and you should be able to find some of those episodes where we've talked about window of tolerance. But I'll just give a little picture. If we think of window of tolerance on the scale from 1 to 10, and the window of tolerance is really in the center part of that. Hypoarousal is like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hypoarousal is when we're shutting down, we're slowing down, we're dissociating, we are losing consciousness, we're going to sleep. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the window of tolerance is at 5, 6, 7, that really sweet spot where we're in the present moment. We feel very connected. We're very engaged. If something happens that we don't like, we are able to deal with it from a prefrontal cortex position, and all is well. That's in the window. And then the upper levels, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's hyperarousal, which is when we get excited or panicked or anxious or stressed out. And everything goes on into high alert and hypervigilance. And our emotions they go into more of the higher level extremes where we feel really angry or really sad or really something. We're really in our feels.
Yeah.
And so we want to be in the 5, 6, 7 range. And so what we're talking about here is when we begin to recognize that we are low, our energy is gone, we're in hypoarousal, or we've ramped up and we're up in those upper numbers and we've gone into hyperarousal. What does that actually feel like in our body? And beginning to be able to recognize that is important so that when we go there, we become aware.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think I'm being dysregulated right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the sooner we notice that, the more chance we have to stay in the window of tolerance, or what we've talked about before is the growth edge. The growth edge is maybe getting close to hypoarousal or getting close to hyperarousal, but in that noticing, we're able to intercept, if you will, our nervous system from getting dysregulated either way. And
Yeah.
so there is like, that's the growth edge. I know you and I both have stories that when we started working with coaches that wanted us to pay attention to what was happening in our body, noticing the sensations, that was pretty new for us. And now we do that with our clients. And there's a period in there that it feels awkward because if you have lived years and years, like really disconnected from your body, not paying attention, you just told me a little bit ago, last week, one day, you looked back and you're like, wow, I was really stressed. But in the moment, you didn't realize how stressed you were. And
Right.
that hadn't happened to you in a really long time.
Right.
So the sooner we can begin to practice noticing what's going on in our bodies, we can bring in specific somatic practices either in the moment or stepping away, or we can be preemptive and just do these practices even before we are getting dysregulated. And the more we do that, it does become easier.
Yeah. I think it's so helpful even just to be able to say the words, I'm dysregulated right now. When I could say that even just to myself or to the other person, I think I'm feeling dysregulated right now. And then the pause and then the moving toward it and tuning in and what are you feeling? This just being able to name it was such a huge help for me and still is. I still, when I can say, I think I'm dysregulated right now, it's like that feels so good because the reality is we do get dysregulated. I mean, often. And there it's not wrong to get dysregulated. It's not bad to get dysregulated. It just is. And so when we can see it and name it, then we can implement practices that really are helpful. And I was just telling you about this morning. I met with my coach, and in the middle of our conversation, I named something from my childhood that was pretty stark. And it's an issue that we have talked about before, so it wasn't anything new, but the way I said it was with more detail and more clarity and more straightforwardly than I really ever have. And immediately after I said it, I felt myself beginning to dissociate. I felt it's almost like things started getting darker, fuzzier. And I noticed it right away, and she noticed it right away too. And I closed my eyes, and she said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I'm starting to dissociate." And then I was able to come right back.
Yeah.
Well, I took a breath. We went slow. We talked it through, but I was able to stay in the window of tolerance where in the past I would have gone into full blown dissociation, possibly um, ended up with a severe headache and spent the rest of the afternoon in bed. Like, I mean, I literally, that probably is what would have happened. But because I noticed the sensations, I was able to catch it right away
Mhm.
and come right back. And now I feel so grateful for that because
Yeah.
yeah, it was really and kind of an amazing moment.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say good work
Yeah, thank you.
and noticing. And of course, your coach noticed, right? You've worked with her long enough to know
Yeah.
or for her to know what was happening.
Yeah.
Um, I'm listening to this thinking about when we go into dysregulation, like you mentioned, we're going into coping behaviors for protection, right?
Yeah.
There's some sort of, when we feel dysregulated and we start coping in the way that we do, those coping things they're telling us this is what's going to make you safe.
Right.
Okay. Now, in the presence of true danger and true harm, I'm so glad that we know how to do that.
Right.
But in your coaching session with someone who's offering you so much love, goodness, and safety,
Yeah.
that part that thought that it needed to get out of the present moment, um, because you tended to it, you were able to really show back up and get the good love and care and witness that you're so worthy of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it would be good to just talk a little bit about, I can talk a little bit about what are those feelings that I feel. Everyone is unique. So, as Kandace, as we talk about, I'm going to talk about hypoarousal, what that feels like. You're going to talk about hyperarousal. And I go into hyperarousal too. You go into hypoarousal too, but I may be a little more proficient down there in the 1, 2, 3. So, but we want to just name some of the things that we have noticed that are typical for us. And every single person is unique in the way that we do dysregulation. So we don't want to come across at all as saying, this is the way that hypoarousal looks for everyone.
Yeah.
But perhaps me sharing a little bit of what it's like for me can help people then say, oh, well, I think that's kind of what I do, but not really. Here's what I do. And then the same on the end of hyperarousal. So should we go into this right now, Candace?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I love that you said don't take so much of what we're going to share of that's the only way it looks.
Right.
It's more, and this is what took us time. It's getting to know your own body.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think for me, and we were just talking about this a little bit ago, because when I go into hypoarousal, things slow down a lot. And I will begin to notice that my senses are fuzzy. My hearing gets fuzzy. My sight gets fuzzy. The room can seem darker even. And if I keep going more into if I get more dysregulated and go further into hypoarousal, it's almost like if I have 6 pages open on my computer screen and I begin to shut them down, and it's just this closing of one after the other. Or I also mentioned it can be like walking through the house and turning off all the lights one at a time until everything gets dark and quiet and I'm off floating somewhere. This is dysregulation where I'm out of the room. I'm disconnected. Now my body is there and I even look like I'm there. Unless it's a one-to-one encounter, usually people would not recognize that I had dissociated. Even probably sometimes when it was a one-to-one, they didn't because
Or I want to say your story group sisters in a group now can probably
yeah,
say share what's going on with you.
right. Exactly. The more that people get to know me and know me in my dysregulation,
Yeah.
then you can spot it. You can spot it in me really well, Candace. I can spot it in you, I think, at times when I
Yeah.
see you going into dysregulation. So, yes, the more that someone knows us, especially in these places, it's really helpful because when we get dysregulated, it's hard to care for ourselves. The deeper we get into hypoarousal, for example, the harder it is for me to be able to stop that downward spiral.
Mhm.
So for me, it's tuning into the awareness that my senses have changed. I'm not seeing as clearly. I start to feel a sense of confusion. If someone is talking to me, I have a very hard time paying attention to what they're saying. It's like I can be looking right at them and seeing their mouth moving and hearing their words, but I can't really connect what it is they're saying. So that's a little bit of, and I will say one other thing is my body gets cold. I often start to feel cold in my body.
Mhm.
So again, these are some of the sensations that I've become aware of. And now when I notice them start to happening, usually I can tune in to be like, oh, what's happening? Oh,
Mhm.
I think I'm being dysregulated. Oh, I'm going into hypoarousal.
Mhm.
Oh, I don't really like that feeling. And then bringing myself back. And we'll talk probably in our next episode about some of the practices that we do to bring ourselves back. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about what it feels like for you to go into hyperarousal?
Yeah, I do, but before I do, I want to say, okay, why are you doing that? Okay, so I want to bring this out. Here's what I want to say about that. We don't always know why. Sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes the trigger is very clear.
Yep.
Sometimes we don't. And that can feel a little more confusing.
Mm.
But whether we do or we don't know, we can still, like you said, begin to notice and put in some practices that we can talk about later.
Exactly. And I'll just stay with that for a second because yes, sometimes we'll be in a conversation with someone, they will use a tone of voice. We won't even catch it in the moment, or maybe a word or a phrase or a certain way they look at us or the way they shrug their shoulder. I mean, it can literally be, it can even be a smell that we're not even consciously aware of. That for me, the smell of a hayfield. I mean, I'm super conflicted when when I smell freshly cut hay. And so I can be driving in the car and I'm not aware that I'm smelling it, but I notice that my body will get agitated. And then I'll be like, oh, I smell freshly cut hay. And so, I mean, it's,
Because you have stories
I have
around.
stories
Yeah.
around haying season and harm that came to me in that time.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That the triggers sometimes we're aware and we catch it. A lot of times we don't. And so it's this dance, right? Of if we recognize a trigger, then we can more easily see our dysregulation. If we see our dysregulation, then we can maybe go back and discover what the trigger was, because that's another thing as we become aware of some of our triggers, that's helpful too.
Mhm. Yeah. Because really the goal is to be able to come back into the present and establish that in this moment right now we are safe.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. We yeah, we can stay present and we're not in a harmful situation.
Right.
Yeah. I I'm hesitating because I feel like it, you know me, I like scales. 1 to 10, where am I at? And so I do feel like I have these levels of, which I do know there's 7, 8, 9, 10, right? But even within that, I think of different ways that I'm going to talk about something specific right now, and that is somebody's tone of voice where I'm sensing that they're disappointed in me. Like I haven't met their expectations.
Mhm.
What happens in my body is very um, physiological. Like my heart will actually start beating a little bit faster.
Yeah.
It feels like um, you had such good analogies. And the only thing I can think of is like it's scrambling eggs
Yeah.
just in a frying pan and everything's getting scrambled up in me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what the anxiety would be like, you know, trying to figure out, oh, are they misunderstanding me? Or, are they accusing me? Like I go into a lot of trying to figure out what they need me to do or what they need me to say or who they need me to be in that moment. And so it's I very much go into hyperarousal. It's brings me like alert and on guard and ready to take action in some way. Um, that's one thing. And then the other thing that comes up for me is if I get really more into the nine, super like panicky, historically, I have turned to substances. Yeah. Glass of wine, couple beers. Like if
Because,
I can't because it calms, it brings calm.
and what's it calming? Describe the feeling. Describe,
Mhm.
if you can.
Yeah.
Can you describe the sensation that needs calming?
Yeah, it would be racing thoughts, trying to figure things out.
Okay.
Um, and so unfortunately, even though something like that can work, I'm also paying a price in my body that it's not healthy, right? And it doesn't really solve anything. And so finding these new ways to be able to do that without the substance um, has obviously is better all the way around. Now, I still like to have a glass of wine, or if we're out listening to music, I'll drink a beer, but I'm very conscious and very intentional about why I'm doing what I do now because I want my somatic practices to be good for every area of my life.
I love that you're naming this, Candace, and because this is so true that when we get dysregulated, we have learned these coping strategies, right? You don't like the way it feels to be really anxious and ramped up like that. So you found out that, whoa, if I have a substance that can bring calmness, that brings me back into that space where I feel better.
Mhm.
And so while the substance helps, it doesn't really help you deal with the trigger that occurred or the reasons why you went into dysregulation. It just in a it deals with the physiological chemicals that are in your body. That's what it does. And not to say that there sometimes isn't a time or a place or a need for that. But if you can instead do what you're doing more and more, and that is turning toward somatic practices that bring you into calmness so that now you're able to look at, oh, what was it that triggered me? Or what, that brings you into a place where you can deal more. I want to use the word healthy. Is that the right word? That you
Oh,
can
I
deal
think that's a good word for it.
in a
Yeah.
more healthy way with the dysregulation that is occurring in your body.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why this has been maybe has felt okay because I haven't had like an addiction problem to alcohol or drugs. Like
Yeah.
I was usually the one, even in high school, that would stop at a certain point. Um, and still today, though that's good, it's still not like what I want to say is the more we put into practices of things. So we're spirit, soul, and body, right? Alcohol, especially consistently, breaks down your body. It's not good for your muscles. There's so many things about it. And I still like to have a drink. I just have to be very intentional. Like if I'm noticing, ooh, do I want to drink because I'm all scrambled up inside? Now it's like, oh no, let's go for a walk in nature.
Right.
Like, let's do a little vagus nerve system regulation first,
Yeah.
And, I do think a lot of people probably relate to this,
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and I want to really take the stigma and the shame out of it because especially during COVID, I don't know if you've seen these statistics and I don't remember what they are, But I'll tell you who didn't go out of business, and that was liquor stores.
And pillow stores, I think too, like, because that's the hypoarousal reaction, right? Is I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to pull the
Wow.
covers up over my
Interesting.
head. So I think uh, all things to bring, that kind of relaxation were also really flying off the shelves. So yeah, really
Yeah,
interesting.
that is very interesting.
Well, Candace, I think this is good. And we want to talk about what are some somatic exercises that we can do, that you and I do use. We want to offer that to our listeners as well, because learning what to do when we recognize that we have become dysregulated is also so important and really helpful. So let's come back next time and talk about some of those strategies.
Yeah, sounds good, friend. Good to be with you today. Love you.
Love you too.